Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's the second day of time trials, qualifications for the 76th running of the Indianapolis 500-mile race. Hello and welcome to Indy. I'm Paul Page, and we have had a most busy but disjointed weekend of time trials here. There are a good many stories, and we're going to try to tell them all for you. Now, those of you that are aware, you may remember that at the end of the day yesterday, we had a good many cars qualified, but there were still 4 key players. Eddie Cheever, Danny Sullivan, Michael Andretti, and the fastest man on the track in the month of May, Jim Crawford, still with an opportunity to run for the pole. So that set the stage for this day, and the action began during the morning's warm-up session. On the track, it was Tony Bentonhausen in the number 16 car. A show of vapor at the right rear of the car, and then suddenly, Bentonhausen was into the wall. But these cars are super strong, and they protect the driver whenever possible. And despite sliding to the infield grass, as soon as the emergency vehicles were there, Tony Bentonhausen climbed out of the car. Now let's go back and take a look at this accident as he slides sideways, and you can see the impact angle with the car and the wall is almost flat. That's the key factor here, because that kept any serious injury from happening in this accident with Tony Bentonhausen. Now let's take a look at the grid as it was at the end of the day yesterday, with Roberto Guerrero on the provisional pole, then Mario Andretti, Arie Luyendyk on the outside. In the second row, Gary Bentonhausen, Scott Brayton, and Rick Mears. The third row, Bobby Rahal, Emerson Fittipaldi, Al Unser Jr. In the fourth row, Stan Fox, John Andretti, rookie Eric Bachelard. The fifth row, Philip Gosch, another rookie, Scott Pruitt, and John Paul Jr. The sixth row, Paul Tracy driving for Roger Penske, Jeff Andretti, and the Canadian driver, Scott Goodyear. That's the starting grid at the end of time trials yesterday. So the action began at 12 noon here. Let's take you back to the very first run of the day with Danny Sullivan, as Bobby Unser, Sam Posey, and I called it. Brack, he was originally scheduled to qualify yesterday. The reason he didn't is fairly complex. Here's Gary Gerald.
And alongside is Rick Gallis, one of the owners with Maury Cranes of that car. We know that Guerrero brought out the yellow light. Danny didn't get a chance to come in and used up too much fuel. Was it simply a matter of time to refuel the car to get back in the
Yeah, it was, Gary. We just had a difficult time getting him back to the fuel center and then back out here. And by the time we got back out, then it was too late. So
how much did that cost you? Is it going to, because it's warmer today, will that deny you a chance to get a big speed?
Well, I think the conditions were actually better, you know, but that's the rules, and we can't go beyond 6 o'clock, and so we just have to take what we can get.
Thank you, Rick.
Well, nevertheless, this run will count as a first-day run in qualifying. He has a chance for the pole as he has started his first qualification lap and is already halfway through it. Danny Sullivan in a brand new Galmer powered by a Chevy.
At times, the combination of his good looks and the media attention that he receives overshadows how good he really is. Of course, he has won this race, and he is consistently a front runner. Just look back at Long Beach as he comes up to complete this first lap. Check the speed. Tainted, you know, as it was a little bit because he touched little Al at the end of that race. It was still a brilliant victory.
Well, the speed average for the first lap above 225 miles an hour for Danny Sullivan.
You know, as I watch him, Paul, he's not really using an awful lot of track. And what this tells us is that he's sticking really good. He's handling good. Look at him there going in turn 3, just down touches the white line, right back out.
Rick Gallis above 225 miles an hour. Will you accept that? Sounds good to me.
So excited about this. This is a good run for Danny.
Rick and Sam, a question. Does Danny set his car up very differently from Little Al?
Not actually. We've been working real close together. Tony Cicali's with us this month, and he and Alan have been working real good together. And this is a good race car, and we've spent a lot of time working on race setups. We really haven't worked hard on qualifying because of the Buicks, and we think we got a good package for race day.
The second lap in at 225.383 miles an hour. Danny Sullivan working down the backstretch now at 228 miles an hour, a backstretch speed. On to the main stretch once again. And Rick Gallis in just a second will have a look at his third lap as he's already begun his final lap. Danny Sullivan averaging 224.6. What do you think, Rick?
Well, we're really excited about this run, and you know, Danny's done a good job, worked hard all month, and we're most excited about the race now because we've got a good race car.
Is this faster than you expected?
It really is. And with these conditions, you know, it's a little bit faster than I thought. So let's get him across and take the checker. We'll be okay.
The conditions being temperatures approaching 80 miles an hour. On the final lap now, Danny Sullivan sees the checkered flag ahead. And Danny Sullivan qualifies.
Out-qualifying his teammate, by the way.
And he slowed down just a little bit, not very much, but it looks like what he's gone into is maybe just a little bit of a front-end pushing problem because he's been cutting under the white lines a little bit lower, a little bit closer to the grass than normal.
That would be a problem they have described with this chassis that they've tried to work on. 224.1 miles an hour. That's the last lap. The four-lap average, 224.838 miles an hour. And Danny Sullivan qualifies for the 76th Indianapolis 500. We'll be back to talk with him right after this.
I'm Jack Arute, and we're with Danny Sullivan, who earlier today completed his qualifying run, good only for the middle of the third row. Danny, would have been any different if you had qualified yesterday?
Well, I'm not so sure whether the speed would have been or the position would have been any different, but I think the speed might have been different. It was cooler. It was ideal conditions. We had to readjust the car this morning for the first really hot, warm, humid day that we've had all week.
The entire team, both you and Al Jr., your teammate, have had their share of problems getting the Galmer dialed in for Indianapolis. So you feel you're getting closer now?
I think we're getting closer, but the car's very sensitive. Of course, we're the quickest Chevrolet A car out there, even quicker Rahal and some of the other ones that are supposed to have the great chassis. So we're not that far off the pace. It's just whether we're going to be able to run strong enough during the race to really compete with the Fords and the Buicks.
Next out was Eddie Cheever. And let's go back to Paul Page for the call.
On the track now, Eddie Cheever. In the warm-up session, he ran over 230 miles an hour, so this could definitely be a bid to the front row. Perhaps even a threat for Roberto Guerrero, though it's not likely. It's a Ford Cosworth-powered Lola out of the Chip Ganassi stable.
Eddie has been, in a sense, besieged this month, criticized by Mario Andretti after the two collided at Long Beach, and facing life in the garages there with a faster teammate, Ari Leyendyk, who was also a former winner. But you know, with all that, I think Eddie has remained very serene and very focused and proud of the fact I think he's driving better than he ever has.
His backstretch speed above 232 miles an hour.
Well, he certainly is, Sam, but if you watch him, he goes into the turns, he's getting way down underneath the white lines. Watch here, clear down to close to the grass, using up all the racetrack he can. The idea, of course, is to keep his speed up through the turns like that.
The first lap at 228.6 miles an hour. So not as quick as his fastest speed thus far in the month, and of course that blistering 230 that he ran this morning. Still not good enough to sit on the front row.
Still not good enough to out-qualify his teammate, Ari Leyendyk, but it's a marvelous one. And remember, Ari ran yesterday when the track conditions were nearly perfect. It was cooler and no wind at all.
This lap is a little bit faster. We'll see if it averages out that way. It does. 229.95 miles an hour.
Getting used to the racetrack a little bit. Remember, the heat changes. It's the first real heat we've had since the track opened here this month of May. So he's getting used to it a little bit.
His fastest front stretch was just turned at 230.7 miles an hour. There's the lap 2 summary. He came down the front stretch very, very quickly.
Keep in mind, that straightaway speed is predicated on how fast he comes to the turn. So his turn speed has been faster also.
Right now, he is headed for a position in the front row. He's going to nudge Ari Leyendyk, his teammate, out of the front row just barely if he can keep this speed up.
Eddie Cheever pokes his nose through the 230-mile-an-hour barrier in the fastest lap he has ever driven at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. A lap at 230.103 miles an hour. He's a threat for the front row. Great run on the back outside. He's still keeping this speed up, and it's looking strong. His fastest turn 3 yet at 231 miles an hour. The speed continues to climb, and Eddie Cheever completes the run. Waiting for the final time and speed.
Just think, 227 miles an hour through some of the turns that are normally 225 would be considered a good time. Which really got the car handling good.
The 4-lap average, 229.6 miles an hour. The last lap, you see it there at 229.8, and that will make him second quick and put him in the middle of the front row for the moment. Michael Andretti, carrying the number 1 of the reigning TPG Cup champion, rolls out now. This again is a Ford Cosworth-powered car. Another possibility to take the pole away from Roberto Guerrero. You just saw we had an incredible performance from Eddie Cheever. Now can Michael Andretti do it better than that?
Now keep in mind, Michael Andretti would be what we would call the factory car, the factory driver. The Lola Factory's factory-type entry car in Ford Motor Company. Little golden-haired boy right now, and he's certainly about the hottest thing we have in the circuit.
Sometimes small things are significant. When Michael came down the pit lane moments ago to start this run, there was a blockage there. He had to delay, shook his fist momentarily. Sometimes that can release a lot of the tension that you feel when you're waiting in line for this all-important qualifying. I think we're going to see a loose run and maybe a very, very fast one from Michael.
Michael Andretti, one of the finest drivers in the Indy cars right now. He's been on the top of his form for several years now.
He won 10 of the poles for the last 20 races. Half of all the races he's been on the pole. Can he do it now?
The car out of the Newman Haas stable. Paul Newman, Carl Haas, the owners on the machine. As he turns now, looking for the green flag and is ready to begin his run. And Michael Andretti is on his way.
217 miles an hour in his warm-up lap. That's a less than we would expect it from Michael, but now is when it starts to count.
The other great young driver in IndyCar racing, of course, is Al Unser Jr., and both of them have won national championships, but neither Al nor Michael has ever won an Indy pole or ever won the race here at Indy, even though both have been second. Right now, Michael has a chance, even though it's a long shot, to take the pole.
Michael down the backstretch at 232 miles an hour. On the front stretch now. He came through turn 3 above 229, but fell off to 224. Through the 4th turn, there's Sandy Andretti, his wife, always nervous and apprehensive at a time like this. The first lap, 227.416 miles an hour.
When Rick Mears was injured the other day, though, Sandy was one of the first over the hospital there to be there with Chris. He's a wonderful person.
Now Michael will get his speed via radio to him. This is going to shake him up because this is not nearly as fast as what he's looking for, Paul. So he's probably going to pick it up, or at least try very hard to pick it up.
Most of the laps have been climbing throughout the run for about everybody here. If Michael Andretti would qualify with his current average, he'd qualify for the outside of the second row, but he picks the average up with a second lap. He's not satisfied, though. 228.4 miles an hour at a second lap.
Now, he can only be very disappointed. This only puts the achievement of Eddie Cheever in even a greater light, because they have the same engine and roughly the same chassis.
What he's doing right now is getting this via radio.
Eddie Cheever, happy with his run.
He should be.
Wonder if he's even paying attention to what Michael's doing. I'm certain he is.
Oh, I bet he is.
Michael gets a call on the radio telling him what he's doing speed-wise, and he's sitting there trying to figure out, what in the world am I doing wrong? Where am I losing? Is it turn speed? Is the pop-off valve popping? But he knows there's something wrong.
He picked up some speed on the backstretch on the last run and came it up to 232.9 miles an hour. His third lap at 228.6. That's his fastest lap yet. He's averaging 228.192. But still not fast enough to put him on the front row.
This, of course, is one of the guys we expected to run about 233 miles an hour in qualifying.
Completing now the 4th and final lap, the 10th mile of qualification. Sandy Andretti looks over at the watches. Obviously not a lot of smiles there, so the final lap at 228.1 miles an hour outside the second row. The 4-lap average at 228.169. Disappointing run for Michael.
I'll give you an example. The 230 miles an hour that he's going down the straight was compared to 240 earlier in the week.
There are the 4 laps. Run for Michael.
I'll give you an example. The 230 miles an hour that he's going down the straight was compared to 240 earlier in the week.
There are the 4 laps in the Valvoline summary, and the average 228.1 for Michael Andretti. So Michael Andretti is not fast enough to unseat Eddie Cheever from the center of the front row, nor take the pole. Right now, Eddie Cheever is with Jack Arute.
Well, Eddie Cheever, absolutely an incredible run, especially in the heat of the day. You really surprised a lot of folks. Did it surprise you?
My car was running really well this morning. We worked very hard to make it. I mean, Morris and I have been working hard for the past week, so has the whole team. And this morning it felt great. I knew I was going into the run. I was hoping to do a 2:31, but I had my eye on a goal and I've achieved it.
An important goal as well, because your sometime teammate here just for Indy had already put a car in front row position. That gave you a lot to think about over the night.
Actually, I'm really glad I had Ari as a teammate. He helped the whole team a lot. He's a great asset. I would like to see him drive with us maybe sometime in the future, but I mean, Ari's been pushing me really hard the whole month, and I've been pushing him, and we have had a good flow of information. And I mean, I'm glad I have him on my side in the race, at least for the first 400 miles.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So Eddie Cheever in the Indy 500. There are plenty of great souvenirs at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and plenty of great stories still coming up. Ted Prappus's car is undergoing a pre-qualifying technical inspection. Now, after Michael Andretti's run, Jack Arute had a chance to talk with him.
Michael, it's got to be a disappointing run.
It was, but the writing was on the wall this morning. For some reason, this engine's down on power, and I knew it this morning, but there was nothing we could do about it because there's no time to change it. So very, very disappointing to know that we should have had a shot at the pole, and we didn't, because I don't think it was the conditions that did it. It's just that we didn't have the power.
When you get out there and you start to put it right to the floor and you know that you're down on power, what's the frustration for 5 miles?
Well, it was really frustrating. After I saw the first lap was only 2:27, it was just big disappointment.
So still one key story. Tony Bettenhausen wasn't the only action in this morning's warm-up session. At the end of the session, Jim Crawford again blew an engine, sending his crew running back for an engine change. It was a pleasant surprise to suddenly see Jim Crawford's car make an appearance on the pit road with mechanics still struggling to install the engine. But in their haste to bring the car out to the line, one of the mechanics who was pushing the car, Mike Perkins, caught his foot under the left front wheel. The car ran over his leg. So Perkins writhed in pain on the pit lane while a number of crew members and other officials rushed to his assistance. And then a few minutes later, at the qualifying line, the car was pushed away. Apparently, the officials had ruled that it was not presented in an appropriate amount of time. So Jim Crawford, along with his Buick-powered car, headed back toward the garage area. What an up-and-down time for Crawford. At the end of yesterday's qualifying practice session, the engine blew. They took it to the garage area. A new engine was placed in the car, and it was brought back to the qualifying line, ready to qualify. But then time ran out. Then this morning, another practice session, another blown engine. But this time was not on Jim Crawford's side. So the man who had turned laps above 233 miles an hour, the fastest man all month, lost his chance for the pole. Jack Arute was right there.
Jim, you came close. You blew an engine in the last practice session, and you guys just thrashed at it, but you didn't make it in time for first day qualifying.
No, I think we missed it by 6 minutes there. It was a hell of a try, though. 40 minutes for an engine change. That's.
But on the way out, they were still working on the car.
Yeah, the rule book says we've got to be there when called for it. So we just tried it. We brought it out in bits, and we thought we could maybe carry on building it in the line here, but they said no. So we'll go and finish it properly and just take a second day deal.
And with that, the run for the pole was over. Roberto Guerrero, officially the pole sitter for the 76th running of the Indy 500. Another great story, that of A.J. Foyt. He tried a run yesterday and waved off it. This is the final lap of his run today. A.J. Foyt running with a pretty good average above 223 miles an hour.
Some people think A.J. ought to retire. I got to say I'm not one of them. At the age of 57, he was able to turn in this terrific run. And to my mind, A.J. Foyt is just as entitled to be in this race as anyone else who can qualify it. I love to see him race.
The average for 3 laps at 223.1 miles an hour. And then powered the car on through its 4th and final lap. And in doing so, was ready to run in his 35th Indianapolis 500-mile race. A.J. Foyt flashed across the yard of brick, took the checkered flag from Dwayne Sweeney. His 4-lap average at 222.790 miles an hour, and A.J. Foyt was in the race. A great qualifying run for the great A.J. Foyt of Houston, Texas. We'll return with more action from the time trials after this message and a word from our ABC station. We're back live in Indianapolis, where Al Unser has climbed into the car originally assigned to Nelson Piquet and has begun to shake it down. We still have not seen an appearance by Jim Crawford anywhere today. He still has to qualify, and Ted Prappus's car has been pulled out of the line. Now, after A.J. Foyt's run, Gary Gerould had a chance to talk with him.
Well, A.J., I know there's got to be a great deal of satisfaction in qualifying for a 35th consecutive time, but I'm sure there was probably a little disappointment because the speed last evening would have put you much further up in the grid.
Well, that's quite true, and like I said today, you know, it's disappointing when something like that happens yesterday, and the car was working beautiful, and then like this morning, you had no practice. I just went to the qualifying line. In the first hot lap I had in the race car is when I took the green flag, and I don't care if you're young or old, that's kind of hard to do at this place because the wind really got me in trouble down in turn 3 and 4, you know, the last 2 laps. I got in serious problem.
The fact that you were running at over 226 miles per hour in the qualifying attempt Saturday evening, did that prove a point in your mind that the old talent is still very much there for A.J. Foyt?
Well, I think I proved a lot of things to a lot of people today, that even though I knew the car worked good yesterday, that you don't have to have all that practice.
And now you get ready for 500 miles once again at Indianapolis. Is this car, this team, is this driver capable of winning one more?
I think the biggest thing in this race right now, where I'm having to start, I'm going to have to be very careful for accidents. Starting back there, that's one reason I'm disappointed that what happened yesterday, where I could have started up front, because right now you can have to drive a smarts-up race, you know.
Well, we wish you safety and we wish you well. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay.
So with all that action, the field changed drastically. We showed you the grid earlier. Here now, after that action, is the way the grid's set, with Guerrero, now Eddie Cheever, Mario Andretti making up the front row. The second row, Lion Dyke, Gary Bettenhausen, Michael Andretti. In the third row, Scott Brayton, Danny Sullivan, Rick Mears. Row number 4, Bobby Rahal, Emerson Fittipaldi, Al Unser Jr. The fifth row, Stan Fox, John Andretti, Eric Bachelard. The sixth row, Philip Gott, Scott Pruitt, John Paul Jr. In row 7, Paul Tracy, Jeff Andretti, Scott Goodyear. And in the 8th row, A.J. Foyt and rookie Jimmy Vasser. Now this year has seen a diverse crop of rookies as any in recent times. One of them, who sadly will not make it into the race, is Nelson Piquet. He crashed heavily and is hospitalized. Our Sam Posey has his story.
During his 13 years in Formula One, Nelson Piquet won a total of 22 races and 3 world championships, an historic career. The end of last season, without a ride for 92, he went home to Brazil. Then came the offer to drive Indy, a scaled-down schedule that would allow him to enjoy life and still race. We spoke to him Thursday, just before his crash.
I'm nearly 40 now, and after everything I've done, I would like to have a little bit better quality of life. When I say quality of life, is maybe sleeping in one bed for many days. You know, we're all in the road in Formula One. We've been all in hotels and different places, and different hotels, different payloads, and that's go forever. And I've been done for 13 years. You know, you miss everything. You miss, you know, a house, a dog, everything.
The former world champion made driving at Indy look easy, running at over 228 miles an hour until this. Turn 4, a 360-degree spin head-on into the wall. Virtually injury-free in his years in Formula One, Nelson's luck had run out. The injuries to his feet and legs are brutal. What an irony that a man just starting to think about a life beyond racing suddenly faces that life with injuries that will make it very different than he could have imagined.
And yet there is some good news about the potential for him to recover from those injuries. Earlier today, Dr. Tom Southern and Dr. Terry Trammell operated on Nelson Piquet to inspect those injuries. They expected that he will be removed from the critical care unit and into a regular room later today. And then sometime during this week, Dr. Tom Southern will go in and begin the process of skin grafts. Good news all the way around for Nelson Piquet. Paul?
See those giant trucks? They transport the race cars, their teams, the extra engines. Some of them are even small machine shops. We'll be back with more from Indianapolis. Back at Indianapolis, what would an Indy 500 be without Mario Andretti? We take you back to his qualification run, the final 2 laps now. Mario had been averaging above 228.7 miles an hour.
Well, interestingly, this run was destined to be just a 1/10 of a mile an hour slower than Eddie Cheever's. Mario and Eddie will wind up on the side-by-side on the front row. Curious, isn't it? They crash into each other a couple of weeks ago at Long Beach. Harsh words are exchanged. Each man comes here on his medal and pumped up, and each turns in his best performance of the year so far. I hope they settle their differences before turn 1 on the first lap of the race, and I'm sure they will.
Mario's one of these guys that really has invented running under the white line. Watch him as he goes down. He gets real close to the walls coming off. But when he goes down into the turns, he really gets down close to the grass. At one time, USAC was even trying to make it a rule that he couldn't do that.
Mario's third lap at 229 miles an hour. A solid qualifying run for this car, owned by Paul Newman and Carl Haas. The 1969 winner of the Indy 500 completes his run, and Mario Andretti qualifies for the outside of the front row. As Mario slows down, the final time for Mario's 4-lap run came up at 229.503 miles an hour. So Mario Andretti completed a qualifying run, and with doing so, sat on the outside of the front row. Now don't forget, coming up next, one terrific race, the International Race of Champions from Talladega. And I'll tell you, you got to stay through the whole thing, but do not miss the last lap. Now, another great story at the Speedway is that of Mark Dismore, a rookie, but with great credentials. There is much more fame and glory to be won in Indianapolis, but there's also pain and disappointment. Sam Posey has the story of Mark Dismore.
Last year, on the day before qualifying, rookie Mark Dismore from Greenfield, Indiana, crashed into the pit wall and suffered multiple fractures. His lifelong dream of making the field for the Indy 500 ended for the moment in the hospital.
The next 2 weeks were really tough for me emotionally. I mean, I not only broke my body, I broke my heart, you know, because ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to come here and be in this race. I mean, I guess especially growing up in Indiana, I mean, it's such a big part of the entire heritage here.
His injury is not fully healed, and his car's gaudy paint job suggesting a confidence he doesn't feel. Mark is back again at Indy this year. 4 weeks ago, he won a Formula Atlantic race, a big step, but he still feels like he doesn't quite belong at Indy. Why did he come back?
Until I can go around this place and qualify and get in the show, you know, I do feel that way, exactly. I feel like an outsider, and I want to be a part of this thing, and in the worst way. But by the same token, I sure as hell don't want to do anything foolish, you know, to force the issue.
Another rookie attempting to qualify in the race and getting some great advice was Lynn St. James, Al Unser Jr. giving her a hand yesterday. And then finally Lynn St. James out on her qualification run, but the laps had been very disappointing. 215 miles an hour up to 216. Her crew was evaluating those runs and trying to decide whether or not those speeds would be fast enough. They were especially disappointing considering that she had been faster than that. Apparently what happened was Lynn St. James was trying to listen to the pop-off valve, as all drivers do, but being a rookie was unfamiliar with the sound. The valve was open, bleeding both pressure and horsepower out of the engine and preventing the lap from being any kind of speed at all. And then finally Dick Simon ordered the car waved off, and the J.C. Penney car was brought into the pits. And Lynn St. James had yet to wait to qualify for the 500-mile race. Two of these drivers, Guerrero and Cheever, have never been on the front row. And it's an absolute fairy tale for Roberto Guerrero. A terrific run, the only man to run 4 laps over 230 miles an hour. This was his run yesterday. A spectacular run for Roberto Guerrero, despite the fact that the racetrack had slowed down for everyone else. It had not for Bobby G.
Roberto Guerrero, of course, had a great debt to settle here at this track. In 1987, when he was a real golden boy in racing, he finished second twice here at Indianapolis. He won other races. He had a terrible crash. He was in a coma for several days, and after that, car owners really couldn't get confident in Roberto, and his career went into sort of limbo. Well, this is setting a precedent for the fact that Roberto is very much back. He is intact and racing brilliantly.
You know, he's not only back, Stan, he's really looking good. All month, he's been running without problems. The car, if you watch it now, he's hardly getting down below the white line. It means the car's really sticking like glue. He's got a lot of confidence into it because, remember, he's going down the straightaway, not too much less than 240 miles an hour. He's running wide open into the turn.
7:07 on the time.
The lap 2 summary at 232 miles an hour, and the crowd continued to urge Roberto Guerrero on with their cheers. Surprisingly enough, Guerrero told me that the car did not react to the hot sun. It reacted only to wind, and there was very little wind.
Yeah, everybody else lost 2 or 3 miles an hour yesterday, and we'd gotten to the point where we thought the track was just slow. And then out came Roberto for this great run. He's been living by himself in a house he owns here at Indianapolis, really missing his wife Katie and his family. It's fantastic to see him achieve this. You see what it meant to the crew.
Another lap reported out is better than 232 miles an hour. Kenny Bernstein is ecstatic.
It's a good team, and it's a fairy tale story from the start to the end. What Sam brought up about him being hurt and coming back now, it really looks like his head is finally back on really good.
And while they didn't know it at that moment, when the checkered flag came out, Roberto Guerrero would become the only man in the first day to qualify all 4 laps over 230 miles an hour. And when the run for the pole was complete, Roberto Guerrero would be the man to occupy the pole position. 232.482 miles an hour. It was a long wait, but Roberto Guerrero was finally on top of the racing world.
On race day, another winner being honored right now. Capping off the ceremonies with a presentation from PPG, Jim Chapman with a check for $100,000 to Roberto Guerrero. He'll also get the keys to a new StarCraft band. Congratulations, Roberto. It's reality now. The check is literally in hand. It's got to be a great moment in a career that's seen more than its ups and downs.
Oh, I'll tell you, Gary, it's wonderful to hold this check in my hand, and I didn't really sleep very much last night. You know, it was kind of a long night, a long day, a long wait, and it's finally mine for sure. Nobody can take it away, so I'm really thrilled. And I'd like to thank Jim and PPG for their great award for $100,000, and I'm going to appreciate it very much, especially receiving it from Jim.
How concerned were you that your teammate, Jim Crawford, might be able to take this check away?
Well, I was very, you know, not only him, but Michael and Eddie were running very fast. There were still 3 cars that had a very realistic shot, and for that reason, I didn't want to, I mean, I just didn't want it to slip away so badly.
And so now you start thinking about 500 miles and maybe a return visit to this platform for even bigger prize money.
Oh, I'll tell you, that would be definitely a lot nicer. So, like you said, we now need to put these to one side and start working on a race setup, and I think we're going to look pretty good in the race too.
We look forward to race day. Congratulations, Roberto Guerrero. We'll go back to Paul Page.
The check was dated yesterday. It took him to today to earn it. Well, here are some drivers still to qualify as we look down a list of about 17 guys who have opportunities yet to make it into the Indianapolis 500-mile race, and there is time to do so, not only today, but in 2 more days of qualifying next weekend. Some great names there. We'll be back with more from Indianapolis. In the time trials from Indianapolis, 8.5 rows are now set with Roberto Guerrero solidly on the pole. Eddie Cheever with his Ford Power in the center of the front row. Mario Andretti outside. The second row, Ari Lyonside, Gary Bentonhausen with the Buick, and Michael Andretti. The third row, Scott Brayton, Danny Sullivan, Rick Mears. Down in the fourth row, it's Bobby Rahal, Emerson Fittipaldi, and Al Unser Jr. The fifth row, Stan Fox, the great midget driver, John Andretti, and rookie Eric Bachelard. In the sixth row, rookie Philip Gott, Scott Pruitt, and John Paul Jr. In the seventh row, rookie Paul Tracy, Jeff Andretti driving for A.J. Foyt, and the Canadian Scott Goodyear. In the eighth row, the great A.J. Foyt himself and rookie Jimmy Vasser. So there are still 3 rows to be filled and 1 position. We will have live coverage of the greatest spectacle in racing, the Indianapolis 500, Sunday, May 24th at 11 o'clock Eastern. Do not miss that coverage. We're looking forward to an incredible Indy 500. The executive producer of the Indianapolis 500 time trials is Jack O'Hara. Today's show was produced by Bob Goodrich, directed by Don Ohlmeyer. Technical director Joey Chavo, Richard Drummond. Associate producers Ben Harvey and Debbie Cole. Feature producer Emily Deutsch. Associate directors Norm Samet and Patrick McManus. The pole has been won by Roberto Guerrero, his first pole position at Indianapolis. And with the incredible speeds, it's only a prediction of what is to come when the 33 roll to the line. I'm Paul Page for Sam Posey, Bobby Unser, Jack Arute, and Gary Gerald. So long for now, and join us on race day.
Excluding the war era, great drivers and mechanical masterminds have pooled their efforts in pursuit of 500 victory. But to win the big prize, you've got to make the big show. Disappointment and disaster loom at every turn in the quest to qualify. To overcome all that, to make the field, is to join the elite of world motorsports, to be an Indy 500 driver, to have a shot at the biggest prize of all. Indianapolis Motor Speedway has proven yet again, just when you think you've got this place figured out, it figures out a way to surprise you. Yesterday was pole day. It began with high-tech track drying equipment battling the effects of morning rain. And as the day wore on, low-tech cleanup battled the dreaded Indy weepers, water seeping up through the track. Practice was delayed until 2 o'clock, and then promptly the pole favorite, Jim Crawford, went out and blew an engine. His pole day bad luck continues. The mandatory half-hour practice session ground on, and Hiro Matsushita, the first Japanese driver to make this race, ground the turn 4 wall after hitting another driver's oil. He suffered a broken leg. Precious time to run for the pole continued to slip away. Already anxious drivers fought to maintain their legendary cool. Finally, 4 in the afternoon, Ari Lyondike is first out to run against the clock. The 1990 Indy 500 winner uses Ford Power to take the early pole. Back to Friday, when a blown engine sent Gary Bettenhausen into the wall for the first time since '68. Yesterday, Gary B. was back in style, and with a smile, he made the big show at nearly 2:29. A A Wednesday frightening moment. In turn 2, Rick Mears slams the wall after a mechanical failure. The 4-time and defending champion slides down the backstretch on his head. But yesterday, with a soft cast on his right wrist and a broken bone in his left foot, Rick qualified as the fastest Chevy, comparatively slow, at 2:24.5. Roberto Guerrero won his first IndyCar race 5 years ago. But these black skid marks stand as moot testimony to the tire testing crash a week later that nearly took his life. Yesterday, in grand fashion, Roberto got even with Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He shattered the track record at 232 miles per hour. New marks for 1 lap and for 4. Until the final gun sounded at 6 o'clock, ending qualifying. Several drivers, including Michael Andretti, stood in line, still with a shot at the pole. Happy Mother's Day from Indianapolis Motor Speedway, scene of time trials for the Indy 500. Big crowd on hand here for this second day of qualifying and what ultimately is the final day of the run for the pole. 74 degrees, bright sunshine, beautiful day for an outing in the grandstands, but the enemy often of the race driver, the hot sunny conditions. As we look at the racetrack, you can see that for the moment it is quiet. But indeed, this grand old oval has certainly been anything but quiet in the last couple of days. Hello, everyone. Dave Despain with ESPN analyst Derek Daly. And in the background, you may hear the engines firing. The track is now open for practice. We're going to explain what must be the most devilishly complicated qualifying procedure in all of motorsports as we go along here in 3 days of coverage. But first, why is this pole procedure so important?
Well, although we come here for the month of May for the race at the Indianapolis 500, there very definitely is 2 races here this month. There's a race for the pole. Now, some people chose not to take part in that, like some of the Chevrolet runners. Bobby Rahal knew he was not going to be successful at that. But there's a lot of prestige for the manufacturers, the engine manufacturers, the drivers, in winning the pole position for the biggest auto racing event in the world. That's why there is so much pressure and so much effort put into qualifying here at Indy. But as we saw yesterday, when rain intervenes, it can throw a whole new set of cards in the deck for Sunday.
Well, let's quickly give you the headline of how this works. Everyone gets 1 shot at the pole. Yesterday, because of the delays, not everyone got that shot, and so indeed today is the second half of pole day, and the conditions are much, much different. Bright sunshine and hotter temperatures. Let's go back to the end of the day yesterday and look at how the front row stood. Roberto Guerrero upheld Buick's hopes for high speeds. Crawford with the blown motor, Guerrero on the provisional pole. Mario Andretti and Ari Luyendyk, a couple of former winners with Ford power, rounding out that front row. Provisional, remember that.
Moving down to the second row, a tremendous run by Gary Bettenhausen. He crashed heavily in his second car. Scott Brayton, who chose to run the Buick instead of the Chevrolet, and then, believe it or not, Rick Mears only on the outside of row 2 at the moment.
Back in row 3 at the end of the day yesterday, Bobby Rahal, Emerson Fittipaldi, former winner in the middle of the row, and Al Unser Jr., plagued with blown engines early in the week, finding enough speed to qualify 9th fastest in the new Gallmer.
Row 4, Stan Fox. He doesn't race many times in IndyCar racing, but he's been impressive here all month long. John Andretti waved off a run early in the day, then came back with a very impressive 2:22. And then the Indy Lights champion, Eric Bachelard, who comes from Belgium, had a tremendous run to qualify on the outside of row 4.
In row 5, Philippe Gosch, not a household name in America, one of those drivers able to secure a ride because he was able to bring the sponsorship along. Scott Pruitt in the All-American entry from the True Sports team way back in the middle of row 5. They're still looking for some speed. And the persistent John Paul Jr. rounding out that 5th row.
Moving back to row 6, Paul Tracy had a very big crash in one of the 92 Marlboro Penskes here earlier in the week. Jeff Andretti's in the middle of that row, driving for A.J. Foyt. And then Scott Goodyear, I can only say, a little bit disappointed because he was so much faster than his qualifying time earlier in the week when he ran above 2:23, 2:24.
All of those drivers qualified on a cool and, for most of the day, a cloudy day. Today, dawn bright and sunny with these drivers still having a shot at the pole. Danny Sullivan, Jimmy Vasser, the rookie, Eddie Cheever, Michael Andretti, and, ironically, the fastest man all month, Jim Crawford, having drawn the last spot in the qualifying line. So now, as the sun was shining down brightly and heat, the enemy of speed, here was the big surprise. Eddie Cheever in the Ford-powered car, blistering the racetrack.
And he can be the enemy of speed, particularly at the end of the day when the track surface gets so hot, it actually sends some of the moisture out of the surface. That was not the case, though, when Cheever ran out, and he was actually quite spectacular. I think he even surprised himself, because he was very worried, particularly after Nelson Piquet's accident. He was a little bit worried and unnervy about these walls being so close, but he turned in a tremendous run.
Cheever had been only sixth fastest during the course of the month, had achieved a speed of 229.550 during the practice, the week of practice that preceded qualifying. But remember again, most of the practicing was done in very cool temperatures that promoted great speed. To run that fast today was a big surprise.
And Cheever has been such a fan of this Ford engine since the first laps he turned early in the winter testing. He said right then, I believe we have a winning package and a winning combination here. He combines that with good handling with the help of engineer Mo Nunn, and Eddie Cheever, I think, had a big smile on his face after this tremendous qualifying run.
Cheever, the graduate of Formula One, who has come to Indianapolis with an average speed of 229.639, putting him in the middle of row one. The man I picked to perhaps win the pole, Michael Andretti. Again, had been fast all month, had reached a speed of 232. A lot of talk here about 230, but it wasn't there today.
Here's somebody we always watch as soon as he takes to the racetrack. He's very spectacular. He's very fast, no matter what racetrack you put him on. And having seen what Cheever did, everybody expected Michael to actually eclipse that mark. He wasn't quite able to get to Cheever's mark, so Michael will end up having a lot more work to do on his race day setup.
The white flag for Andretti as he heads into the final lap of his qualifying run. The reigning IndyCar champion, the standard bearer now of the Andretti family legacy. And knowing full well, I think, that he didn't have a shot at the pole, perhaps going out there to race his dad, who at that moment sat on the outside of row one.
The interesting thing, if you watch very closely, you can see Michael's car actually twitch ever so slightly on the entrance to corners. Now, that's something that can spook drivers on super speedways here. So I would estimate or guesstimate, whatever you want to say, that Michael was not 100% happy with the handling of the confidence feel in this car during this qualifying run.
Andretti came to the checkered flag, stopping the clock with an average speed of 228.169, and that was good only for the sixth fastest qualifying effort of the day. Or we should say the sixth fastest qualifying effort overall. It's been the second fastest time of the day. Now, we have a crack team down on pit side to cover the action today. Indeed, 3 pit reporters who will be keeping you up to date. And let's meet the first one now, Gary Lee.
Thanks, Dave. Hi, everybody. Well, the story yesterday was the Kenny Bernstein Quaker State team. The story today is the Kenny Bernstein Quaker State team. I'm flanked by their drivers. Here's Roberto Guerrero. Shattered the track record yesterday. Broke the 230 barrier. We'll talk to him momentarily. But Jimmy Crawford, who'd been a rabbit all week, you may recall, he blew an engine yesterday. They changed the engine. Was ready to practice this morning. Then what happened?
We did it again.
You broke
something in there, yeah.
So the crew goes back, they changed the engine, but you couldn't get back out to maintain your position in the qualifying line. Consequently, you become a second-day qualifier. The best you can do if you qualify this afternoon would be starting 22nd.
Exactly right.
You think maybe Roberto will share some of the money with you?
Well, that's a good idea.
I think it is. You've done a lot of testing on the car.
Yeah, we've both done it. It's one of those deals that for Quaker State and for Buick, if anybody had to beat me, then it had to be him. So it's not a complete disaster.
Always personable. The Scotsman now living in Florida. And here is the guy that shattered, electrified the crowd yesterday. 232.482, a 4-lap qualifying record. Right behind, they're about to make a presentation, $100,000 from PPG. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes.
I feel obviously bad for Jim. You know, it would have been really nice to have 2 green Quaker State cars on the front row. Sometimes you get the break, sometimes you don't, and I seem to have gotten them this weekend, so I'll take them. I'd like to thank PPG for the award that they're just going to present me of $100,000, and obviously thank Quaker State, the whole Buick people, and the whole King Motorsports organization. Really, they did a wonderful job, and it's sure nice to be on the pole. Now we have to work on the big one.
Racing can be a trade-off. 87, you almost had the thing won, then a serious practice crash, some time in the hospital unconscious. Does this offset that?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think this upsets a lot of things. You know, it's wonderful. I don't even think about the past. You know, this is the future, and we'll just have to try and keep going, you know, the way it's been going so far.
What would you like to say to Nelson Piquet, who's perhaps watching right now?
Well, I mean, obviously a tough break. You know, obviously he created a great impression here. Everybody was really impressed with the way he was doing, the way he handled himself. So we just hope that he liked it enough that when he gets better that he'll come back and do it again.
Here's the better half. This is the gal that's going to spend all the money. This is Katie. You got it spent already?
You got that right. You bet I do.
Buy some new tennis rackets. We'll play tennis later this month.
Okay, sounds good.
Congratulations. They're going to run over there, Dave Despain, and collect a check for $100,000 from PPG. A pair of comeback stories on that Quaker State Buick team. Both those drivers have been badly hurt at this racetrack. They had very different outcomes here today.
You like Katie's hat? You like Katie's hat?
Yeah, I like that hat.
It looked good.
We are going to take a look now at the updated grid. We have had a qualifying attempt from every driver. Guerrero held the pole. Cheever took second. Mario dropped to the outside of the front row. Harry Lyondike with a great run earlier today will be inside row 2. Bettenhausen and Michael Andretti alongside. Michael, many felt, had an outside shot at the pole. We'll hear from him in a moment. Scott Brayton chose Buick Power, carried into the inside of row 3. Danny Sullivan alongside, and Rick Mears. 2 big surprises there that we'll talk about. Ray Hall, Fittipaldi, and Al Unser Jr. will comprise row 4. In row 5, Stan Fox, John Andretti, Eric Bachelard. Row 6 is Gosh Pruitt and John Paul Jr. The qualifiers thus far today, rounding out with Paul Tracy, Jeff Andretti, Scott Goodyear, and finally A.J. Foyt. And so now I think it's time to go to the second man who took a shot at the pole today. Let's hear from Michael Andretti as we go back to the pits and hear from the second member of our pit reporting team.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Marty Reed, and right alongside me is Michael Andretti, who is all week long one of the 3 fastest every single day out here. But now, in the heat of 73 degrees, you're on the outside of row 2, and I know you're not happy.
Well, it's not the heat, for sure. The car worked perfect. It was capable of doing the pole, but we just had a problem with the power. We just lost power, which we lost power this morning, and we just didn't have time to do anything about it. And we pretty much knew we were in for this.
You're about the only Ford who had power problems, because you look up on the board and 3 out of the top 4 are Fords.
Yeah, I know. The engines have been running perfect all week. I mean, not one little problem. And then when it comes to qualify, I have my little problems. But, you know, qualifying is one thing, race is another.
You get it sorted out by then?
It's sorted out. The car's ready to go. I mean, we could race tomorrow, you know, if we put another engine in it. But, you know, it feels good.
Michael Andretti, he'll start on the outside of row number 2.
Obvious disappointment for Michael Andretti, but he is certainly not the only one. There have been a great many difficulties and disappointments here. One of them for A.J. Foyt. Got up to 226 yesterday, blew the engine. He's with our Jerry Punch. Jerry?
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. I'm Jerry Punch. This man here needs no introduction. Super Tex A.J. Foyt, 4-time Indy 500 winner. And A.J., a good qualifying effort for you today, 222.7. Not what you would have liked to have run and not what you were running yesterday.
No, that's true. You know, we changed the motor last night, and we didn't get no practice this morning. So I just rolled the line, and we could have waited till this evening and probably run faster and shook the car down. But after everything went wrong yesterday, I didn't want to take a chance. I just wanted to get in the race. I had nothing to gain, just get a spot.
226 miles an hour yesterday. You had to be holding your breath that 4th lap, and it just let go down the backstretch?
It just broke a connecting rod bolt. One of them things that happened, but I tell you, I run the 226 a lot easier yesterday than I did today. I thrilled the hell out of myself the last 2 laps.
Pretty tough on a man who's still awfully young at heart.
Well, that's quite true, but it's catching me.
A.J. Foyt trying to make it one more win, maybe win number 5 in the cards here at Indy.
Dave?
Here is a car that will be driven by one of AJ's compatriots among the four-time winners. Al Unser Sr. will pilot this machine. Gary Bettenhausen is about to take it out and shake it down as we continue our coverage from Indianapolis Motor Speedway. At Indianapolis throughout the month of May, time-honored traditions take shape and are observed and honored, and that is certainly happening with the huge influx of people that we've seen here this afternoon. There is part of that crowd, the part that have earned seats overlooking Pit Road, where right now there is, I think, one of the more interesting stories of the month, certainly one of the star-crossed teams of the month, John Menard's team with the Buick engines. They've lost Nelson Piquet, their rookie driver, to a horrible crash in Turn 4, and they have turned for help in that time of need to one of the great Indy legends of all time. Let's get the story from Pit Road.
Thanks, Dave. John Menard on my far right. No introduction needed for the guy in the middle, Al Unser Sr. And, John, what is the game plan today? We see Gary sitting in the car, ready to go out when they open it up for practice.
Well, Gary's shaking the car down a little bit, and as soon as we get that over with, we hope to put Al in the car, and we hope to get it qualified today.
All right, game plan as far as you're concerned. Obviously, it's a little hot right now. You haven't had any laps in it. What about happy hour? Could we see you in our last hour telecast today going for it?
Well, I hope so. I don't know exactly what we're going to do until I get myself adjusted and see how the car fits me and how many, whether it makes me happy or not. And hopefully we can do it today. That's what we're trying for.
Well, you're famous for not just taking any kind of ride, so you must see something in this car that you didn't see in some other teams. What was it that turned you on to this ride?
Well, it's a very strong team. It's a very fast race car. I think the Buick, they've worked very hard on the motor, and I think they're close enough to where it's worth a gamble.
Well, this is one guy we'll be keeping our eyes on today. Dave?
All right, thank you very much, Marty. Interesting to see Unser back in the car.
He brings such a huge amount of experience to this team, and Al Unser is known for being very steady on race day. Maybe this is one of the keys that Buick might need and might benefit from on race day.
Buick versus Chevy versus Ford. That is one of the more interesting stories. Rather famous names in American racing. Interestingly enough, there has never been a driver named Smith in the Indy 500. We'll be right back. At Indianapolis Motor Speedway, a great many surprises during this month of May, and I suspect a lot more still to come, and how the fans do flock in to see what's happening out here during this long month. There have been some wall-smacking incidents. Unfortunately, a couple of those proved to be rather serious. Most, on the other hand, have been like Tony Bettenhausen's this morning.
And this was caused by mechanical failure, not by a driver mistake. We see Tony make very heavy contact with the turn 3 wall, destroys the left side of that car. This is one of the Penske's that Rick Mears actually drove last year. Let's watch from another angle. Tony's already sideways, but you can see the violence of the impact when he strikes that outside wall. Just look at the damage to the complete left side of that car, but thankfully Tony himself was able to step out uninjured.
Well, that crash was not unlike the Mears incident, triggered by mechanical. He hit the wall about the same way, but did not get upside down. Let me update you on medical situations. You know by now that Nelson Piquet slammed the wall here after turning in just a brilliant rookie performance. Quickly about that, your reaction to Piquet's coming here.
Well, he really became a favorite with everybody here very quickly. He didn't come here as an arrogant three-time world champion. He came here on the ground floor for a learning experience, but unfortunately he had a terrible crash.
And for Piquet, of course, the problem was massive surgery. We're looking at Lynn St. James out on the racetrack, and we'll get to her story in just a moment because it's certainly one of the big ones. Quickly on Piquet, a horrendous injury to his left ankle. He also has injuries to his right ankle. He underwent what Dr. Terry Trammell called house cleaning surgery this morning. They found no infection, no complications. He will be moved out of intensive care later today and continues to be described as resting comfortably. But I think the most telling remark from Dr. Trammell was earlier this week when he said that the degree of recovery and the timetable for recovery was purely speculative. His career is over. He is hurt very badly. Hiro Matsushita is resting comfortably after a couple of hours of surgery. He has a broken left femur after the crash that you saw up at the top of the show. And speaking of doctors, we have one standing by on pit road, not for emergencies, but rather to update not only the Lynn St. James story, but the entire story of the team led by Derek Walker. So interesting here. Last year was Willie Ribbs. Let's get the latest from Doc Punch.
Indeed, Dave. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, it's not a medical story we're talking about. It's a little bit more pleasant task here talking with Derek Walker. And Derek, you have put together the team, the McKenzie Group team for Canadian Scott Goodyear, in a tremendous effort in 3 events this year, 2 top 10 finishes, including a 5th at Long Beach. Now you've got a big decision to make. You qualified a backup car yesterday, a 91 car, and you had the 92 sitting here a foot away from us. What do you do if you put this car in the field? You have to pull the old car out.
Yeah, the rules say that we got to remove the 91 before we run the 92. Right now, we're going to just get the 92 up to speed and then make that decision when the time comes.
Now, you have a backup car here for Johnny Rutherford. You brought the Mario Andretti car. How does it stand?
Well, we originally bought this car from Carl Haas to run Johnny here, and we got a sponsor. He found a sponsor, and we came here to do the job, and the money didn't come, so we've had to put it on the back burner, so to speak, for a little while. Yeah, maybe next weekend we can find somebody, either get the sponsor up to speed or find somebody else to put in it.
So a lot of critical decisions being made here on pit road. Car owner Derek Walker standing by. And as you are watching Raul Boesel on the racetrack, practice continues here at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Second day qualifying underway on ESPN. We'll be back with more after this.
Practice is underway at Indy. Understand that whenever anyone wants to make a qualifying attempt, they simply move to the head of the line, practice stops, and then they're able to go back out onto the racetrack. So the cars you see running now are merely practicing, but there will be cars making qualifying attempts, we anticipate, during this hour of coverage and also later this afternoon during happy hour.
And so much changes, not only just on the second weekend, but on the second day. Raul Boesel, we got a quick glimpse of him earlier on. He is, in fact, just testing Dick Simon's spare Panasonic car. Maybe he will officially become the driver of that car, but at the moment, he is only testing that vehicle.
That, of course, is part of the ever-shifting cast of drivers and cars here that has become so much a part of the Indianapolis story. We should indicate, we saw Lynn St. James earlier. She has not made the show as yet, and we hope that she will, of course. I want to take you back to last night on Saturday Night Thunder and a wild night of sprint car racing. That is the reigning series champion, Robbie Stanley, doing a Rick Mears down out of turn number 3 and all the way into turn 4. And again, the roll cage held up. It's all part of a wild month of racing at Indianapolis, and we were happy to get a chance to cover it. Look at the move by the guy in yellow. That is Jim Keeker with a V6 powered Sprinter, and he finally gets around Rick Howerton, who did a magnificent job of holding off some of the best in the business, but ultimately it was Keeker who got the checkered flag. And I'll tell you what, it means it's going to be an interesting Saturday Night Thunder series while we're up here in Indianapolis. One other thing I want to show you from last night. This was a wild one. That is Stevie Reeves, one of the best young talents in this part of the country. He backed her into the wall and was taken to the hospital and nearly tore the back end off the race car. There was some concern about his situation, but as it turns out, well, let's find out exactly what his situation is. I understand we can go trackside now and get a medical update that will be just as current as we can make it.
In fact, Dave, we can go straight to the horse's mouth. Stevie Reeves, how are you feeling?
I'm pretty sore this morning. It's a little hard to pick up my shoulder and move around a little bit, but, you know, we come to go racing, and this is kind of where I want to go, so you need to be out here. It didn't do me no good sitting at home.
As far as any other injuries, just the right shoulder, you said you felt it pop out and then pop back in?
Well, yeah, they think I dislocated it and the muscles pulled it back in, but I took a pretty good shot. Car's in worse shape than I am. That's what concerns me right now, but no, it's just one of those deals. It's just a racing accident. I mean, you're out there running hard and those things happen, and if that's the worst that comes out of it, that's pretty good.
Well, the guys in the in-car camera truck want to talk to you. They say there's some damage they want you to take care of. Let's go back upstairs. Good to see you out of there. Thanks a lot.
He certainly did trash that onboard camera, but he gave us some great Saturday Night Thunder pictures. Let's talk about history. Let's look at the fastest 4 laps in the history of Indianapolis Motor Speedway by some 7 miles an hour over Emerson Fittipaldi's previous record.
And isn't it just amazing what a washed-up driver can do? When I say washed-up, Roberto Guerrero's career took a backward step after that terrible crash in testing here at the Speedway. He drove for Vince Granatelli. I think he was let go because I don't think Vince believed in him enough. He got the Alfa Romeo deal, and he was let go there because the engine didn't have enough horsepower, but the team thought the driver didn't have enough horsepower. But then see what happens here. The driver gets surrounded by good people, good equipment. He already has the talent because you're born with that, and suddenly he's a star. It was a tremendous one for Roberto, and I think there wasn't a single person here at the Speedway anywhere that wasn't just delighted to see this run.
One could not help but root for his teammate Jim Crawford, given the fact that he, too, has had difficulties here at this racetrack over the years, given the fact that he had been the fastest throughout practice. But bottom line, there was not a person in the house who begrudged Roberto Guerrero this success.
And when you look at his run, the amazing thing, this is the fastest car on the racetrack, and yet, if you look at his line, he doesn't look flustered in any way, shape, or form. In fact, he almost looks slower than other people. He doesn't put the inside wheels below that white line very much at all, and that is a sign of a very good handling car. Look at this, the inside wheels just barely inside. He doesn't even go out to the wall. He turns back in again, stays pretty much in the groove, and again, he doesn't have to go to the high side of the wall. That is how good that car was set up for Roberto, and he has had a smile on his face since the very first lap he took in this car way back in winter testing.
He was first to go more than 230. The power plant is Buick. It is a V6. It is a push rod motor, a so-called stock block. It gets 10 additional inches of turbocharger boost because of its configuration, and it only runs at Indy because it's not allowed that extra boost elsewhere, so they focus all of their effort and all of their attention here at Indianapolis. It finally paid off big time. The question is reliability for the race.
Reliability, but at this very moment, Roberto has such an adrenaline rush because no longer, in years past, you had to wait to come around to see your pit board to see what lap time you did. These cars have a digital display on the dashboard that shows Roberto his exact speed every time he crosses the finish line. So he knew he was setting lap records every time he did it.
The old record, as we said, was 225 and a half back in the days when Chevrolet ruled at Indianapolis. Emerson Fittipaldi owned that record from 1990. Here are the numbers as he shattered it yesterday. Roberto Guerrero averaging 232.482 miles per hour. His team owner is Kenny Bernstein, and here's his reaction.
Okay, I know he slowed down after the run. It was close to 6 o'clock. What happened? Because you know some people are going to say, hey, he slowed down so that Mario wouldn't get a chance to possibly run.
Well, sure, but we ran out of fuel. We had everything on the limit. I mean, right to the nth degree. That's been our strategy since day one here. Run fast every day, try to be the quickest every day, and try to win the pole or certainly be on the front row. So we took no chances on anything in the sense of being over conservative. We were on the other side. We were very much on the edge of everything we could possibly do to get the pole, and that's one of the things we did. We knew it was going to be close on fuel. That's exactly right.
All right, I got to know, do you guys jaw with each other now? You're running 300.25 miles, and they're running 232. Do they kid you about, hey, can you do that and turn left?
Yeah, well, they always try to make me feel good by going 301, right? But then they say, but you don't make any turns down there. So I say, yeah, but you don't go 301 with your eyes closed most of the time either.
And so Bernstein, a happy camper, fastest on the drag strip, fastest here at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. When we come back, we're going to update that Raul Boesel story, find out if he will indeed have a ride as practice and qualifying continue at Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Back at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, you're watching Raul Boesel on the racetrack. Now, he is driving the Simon racing machine, normally driven by Hiro Matsushita. We mentioned earlier, you heard Dave Despain talking about Matsushita's problem yesterday, getting an oil from another blown engine in front. He slapped the wall, broke his right femur or thigh, and is hospitalized here in Indianapolis. Now, standing by Steve Fusick, the business manager for Simon Racing. Steve, what is the status now with that car? We have seen Raul Boesel on the track. Will he qualify the car for the race?
Well, we're not sure as of yet. An official decision hasn't been made yet. We've been trying for several months to put together a full year deal with Raul, and since we haven't been able to do that yet, he was in town. We put him in the car. The crew was a little bit down yesterday, obviously, after the problem with Hiro. So we thought, well, let's give the crew something to work on for a bit. Get Raul out, get him some laps in the car, and we'll see what happens. You know, we're trying to put together a deal right now with Panasonic, Sega video games, and Raul's sponsors to run him in the race.
Raul Boesel, no stranger to the Brickyard. He finished third here back at 89, guys, and right now he has a shot to maybe get the good car, already turning laps over 216 miles per hour. Dave?
The key is Panasonic. Hero brought the money. The question is, can they keep it for Bozell? And that's a big story here. Who's got the sponsor dollars? Here's the way they stand. Guerrero has the pole with a Buick. Cheever and Andretti, Mario Andretti, have Fords to round out the front row.
Row 2, Ari Lyondike, who was the first qualifier yesterday. Gary Bettenhausen, very much the crowd favorite here. And then Michael Andretti.
Only once since 1979 has the team of Roger Penske been forced out of the front row. Rick Mears on the outside is the best Penske car. He's flanked by Scott Brayton and Danny Sullivan in the middle. And then we have, of course, Bobby Rahal lining up the next row.
Down to row 5, Stan Fox, John Andretti, and Eric Bachelard, the first and the fastest of our rookies.
Gash, Pruitt, and John Paul Jr. make up row 6 as we run down through the cars that have qualified. It's Tracy, Andretti, and Goodyear in row 7. AJ is going to be way back in row 8, and then Jimmy Vasser. We'll be right back. The racetrack is live and green. And one of the big stories here, inevitably a big story when you have a staff of public relations people numbering into the 20s, Lynn St. James, her sponsor, very heavily behind this effort. She is not yet in the field, but she's in the car and smiling. And for a report, we go to Marty Reed.
Well, she may not be smiling too much right now, guys. They've got a problem, and you don't know what is wrong, do you?
Well, you know, this Cosworth's been around a long time, but the whole world of turbocharging with the way the air comes in, the turbocharger works, and then the pop-off valve and the wastegate, something's not right here, so we can't get any boost. Without boost, we don't have any horsepower. Without horsepower, we aren't going to be able to get our car up to speed. So the guys are just going to take it back and go work on it. But we really want to get out here today. I told them, I said, the goal is to get in the field today and to get in with, we know it was a respectable time. So I know they'll get it done.
2:16 yesterday just wasn't going to cut it.
No, we know we're capable of so much better. It was early. I mean, I think that was the right call. So we want to get the agency rental car, JCPenney Spirit, the American Woman car in the field. And, you know, at a good 219, good 220, we know we're capable. The weather's going to be a little hot. We may lose a little bit of that because of the weather. That we can't control, but we can control the machinery here, so we got to get it up to snuff.
Well, they want to get this one back to the garage area so they can work on it. Let's go to Gary Lee with Jim Hall.
Yeah, let's go back 1978. Car owner Jim Hall, winner Al Unser Sr. He won again in 1980 with Johnny Rutherford. Then you took a sabbatical, and now you're back for your second year. You've got John Andretti in. He was in the primary car, but now you have Didier Tays out working.
Yeah, we put Didier in our third car actually this year, and we're just getting him in the car this morning and then trying to get him comfortable in it and see how he does in it.
You're comfortable running two cars here, on beyond the rest of the season. Will you campaign two cars or just John?
Well, the only arrangement we have is for Indy, and I suspect it won't go on.
I don't know if we can show it or not, but they're allowing some shorts, if you will, just above the knees in the pit area, and John Andretti is out here. He may have the ugliest pair of legs on any driver in IndyCar racing. He needs to hit a tanning bed someplace and get some tan on theirs. Well, the track is open for practice. The practice continues. This is qualification day number 2 as we prepare for the 76th running of the Indianapolis 500. We're live at the Brickyard.
Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We spoke of surprises at the top of the show. I think there has been perhaps, Derek, no bigger surprise than the poor performance of Roger Penske's team and of the new Chevy B engine. By any measure, it has to be a disappointment.
That's right. Very seldom does Roger Penske ever come here without hoping to qualify on the pole, and that's very worse on the front row. Many times he's totally dominated the front row here, but they've been very quiet all month. There was a newspaper report earlier in the week that said they thought Mears was sandbagging. Absolutely not the case. They simply are not fast enough with this new Penske car. It's not fast down the straight, and this new B version of the Chevrolet engine, which is supposed to have upwards of 40 horsepower, more than the regular Chevrolet that we're used to, simply is not able to get the job done here.
It was out-qualified, in fact, by the old-style Chevy engine of Danny Sullivan in the Gallmer chassis, which everyone said was going to be a sled on the big oval. Sullivan put his in the middle of row 3, and Mears, his former teammate, is outside the third row. Again, the statistic, only once since 1979 have these guys been pushed off the front row. Although, remember, that was in 1985. The driver was Danny Sullivan. He was in the third row, but he won the race. These guys were thinking 2 weeks ahead.
It's a very interesting run here. I would say this is probably Rick Mears' quietest and least noticed run ever in qualifying at the Speedway. When he finished, he drove down the pit lane, and all the excitement was still surrounding Roberto Guerrero. Mears pulled in. Nobody was there. One mechanic arrived. Everything was quiet. And, you know, it just seemed to me that, times changed. Suddenly Guerrero was the star and Mears wasn't.
And here's his reaction.
Well, it's been one of those kind of weeks where the Chevy hasn't been dominant. Team Penske was not getting a lot of headlines except the day you happened to crash. Evaluate it all for me.
Well, basically we just, we got here, the car was a little imbalanced, so we started getting that together. And about the time we started getting that organized, and we had the trouble with, the crash, and he just got behind a little bit. The Marlboro team did a tremendous job, with what we had to do and everything else to get things turned around. And I'm pretty pleased with it. We've been working most of the time on race setup and the majority of the week. So, really, we just went out there and got 4. You can see how consistent the laps were. I think we can race at that. So that's what we're trying to do.
Are you guys, or tell me how disappointed you really are, because the focus of attention was originally supposed to be on the new Chevy B against the Buicks, and all of a sudden it's all Buick Ford XB.
Well, we knew good and well. We've been saying it for years with the Buicks, with 10 inches of boost. As soon as they got the whole program together, they were going to be tough. This year they got a car built for the Buick and got their program together, and, you can't beat horsepower. So basically that's what it boiled down to. We knew it was coming, and it has.
All right, I got to ask you about the foot and the wrist. You're going to be able to go 500 miles.
Oh, yeah, that'll be no problem. We're going to take a day or so off here now and kind of recoup a little bit. And, fortunately it's on the left foot instead of the right, the one I don't use during the race, and so that'll be much better than last year.
He is the consummate professional. I wouldn't bet against him come race day as he and Emerson Fittipaldi start farther back than usual. And I think that's an appropriate way to get into a bit of trivia from the Brickyard. The question is, who was the last national champion who was able to come and win the Indy 500? And the answer is Rick Mears. He did it back in 1984. Don't bet against the Oval Meister on Memorial Day. We're back at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Dave Despain and Derek Daly with our pit reporter crew of Gary Lee and Marty Reed, Dr. Jerry Punch, updating all the action from the Speedway, where pole qualifying is finally complete. Midway through the second day, the track is now open for practice. The cars presented at the line for qualifying attempts thus far, 29. 23 of them have actually qualified. The other 6, for various reasons, did not make an attempt. Rookies in the field thus far, 4. The average speed, 223.960, and the fastest speed, Guerrero's 232.482. And Derek, some thoughts on the rookies in this field?
Very interesting bunch of rookies here. Paul Tracy, he could become a star of the future because he has everything going for him with the Penske organization. Philippe Gache, not very well known here, came from Formula 3000. Jimmy Vasser, road racing background, could be a star. And then we have Jovi Marcello from the Philippines.
Power plants and chassis. The Chevy Indy engine, the A and B configuration, by far dominant in terms of numbers here, but not in terms of speed. The Buick, only 6 of them here, but they're the fastest so far.
Another rookie worth mentioning, I didn't mention him, was Eric Bachelor. In fact, he was the fastest rookie in the field as we stand right now.
Good point. And not, as yet, no Cosworths in the field, but keep in mind that Lynn St. James has one of the old Cosworths, and we'll try to put that one in the field. These are the cars that have been out thus far. Lola leading the way, and you see 3 different Lolas. Bear in mind that there is a different Lola for each of the engines. We have reached the degree of sophistication in this sport where the Lola chassis is now built specifically for each of those power plants. One was built specifically for the man who attempted to reach the pole today and did not. The Ford chassis has been very, very successful. The Ford engine is just unbelievable, and I think 52-year-old Mario Andretti is worth a discussion here because he now sits at the outside of row 1, and for the 2nd year in a row he's up front. Let's take a look at the qualifying run that he made here yesterday to 2:29.
He actually set the 2nd fastest lap speed of the whole month here, and he did it, I think, on Friday afternoon or Friday evening, just before qualifying, when they put this qualifying engine. They say it's a qualifying engine, but really, I don't think they put much effort into having a sprint engine as such. It is a little bit crisper, but Mario comes back with the package that he likes to develop. He likes to try and develop these so-called unfair advantages. The new cars, the new engines, that's what he's always had a history of doing in his career, and he has been very, very successful at it. And you can bet there's another Andretti Andretti smile after he took the checker flag here.
The new Cosworth Ford XB engine debuted, first tested last fall. October, I believe, was the date, and lo and behold, it has come here and run close to 230 miles an hour. And then, of course, there is the other grand old man of the Speedway, and that is A.J. Foyt, and we heard from him earlier today that Foyt is indeed in the field, but with a huge disappointment. I believe we're going to go back trackside now and check in with, is it Gary Lee? Gary Lee. Gary, go ahead.
You know, Dave, on Saturday Night Thunder, I'm up in the booth. It's nice and air-conditioned, but I have a complaint out here. All these drivers ride carts and tire carts around, but we guys in the media have to walk. So this year, I went out and bought a pedometer to see just how far I do walk. Now, in 1 week, I've walked, let's see, just over 32 miles. I'm worn out. I think I'll go home and hit the hot tub and soak these sore puppies. We still have more time to practice and perhaps qualifying at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Is open. How mystical is the appeal of this place? Consider that yesterday some 200,000 people flocked in here to watch one car go around at a time, such as the Indy 500. Who is left to qualify? Well, there are some interesting challenges awaiting the likes of Al Unser, Buddy Lazier, Gordon Johncock last year from last to sixth. Mark Dismore, Lynn St. James, and Jim Crawford still have qualifying efforts to come. Crawford, the fastest man here so far. Tony Bettenhausen will try to come back. Didier Tays, again, John Cock, and Fabrizio Bavarza. Let's go down trackside and hear from Dr. Jerry Punch. Doc, this is going to be last chance. What do you got to say down there?
Well, just a quick update here from the Quaker State Garage. They are working, they are hustling, trying to change the Buick engine. A tough break. This Buick has run so well the entire month. They have essentially been bulletproof, but now they've had 3 different days and 3 different problems. They're hoping to get the Buick back in and get Jim Crawford back out for a qualifying run. We'll be able to update that later this afternoon, but Crawford hoping maybe to duplicate that 233.5 mile per hour speed he turned earlier last week. Dave?
He's never had good luck here.
Of course, one of the reasons he wants to get qualified this weekend is they need to work on their race day setup all next week, not work on qualifying setup. So they need to get done and finished and packed away with their qualifying setup this evening.
The importance of this second day is just that. It gives you an extra day, an extra week of race prep if you can get it in the show today. So we'll be summing that up at 6 o'clock. Marty Reed, a final report from Pit Road.
Yeah, guys, we had a chance to talk to Dick Simon. He says his plan is to get Lynn St. James out here between the 5 and 6 o'clock hour. So anybody who wants to tune in on Mother's Day, and before all of us get in trouble, we better say hello and happy Mother's Day for Gary, you guys up top, and especially my mom. She'd never let me home if I didn't.
Well, we'll join with a happy Mother's Day wish to all those mothers of our crew out there. They're all here working. We can attest to that. Take a look at the rows. Guerrero shatters the record to take the pole. Cheever and Mario Andretti put the Fords alongside as Buick and Ford dominate qualifying. Harry Lyondike, Gary Bettenhausen, and Michael Andretti make up row 2.
Moving on to row 3, Scott Brayton in the Buick, Danny Sullivan, the fastest Chevrolet, and then Rick Mears. Row 4, Bobby Rahal. He had hoped to at least be on row 3. He's in the inside, Emerson Fittipaldi in the middle, and then Al Unser Jr. Watch him on race day.
Continuing the rundown of cars that have qualified thus far, Stan Fox in a 1990 car, John Andretti and Eric Bachelard. In row 6, Philippe Gosch, Scott Pruitt, and John Paul Jr.
Moving down, we have Tracy, Jeff Andretti, Scott Goodyear, and then the last 2 qualified cars so far, Foyt and Jimmy Vasser, the rookie.
Qualifying efforts still to come this afternoon. We're going to sum all of that up for you later on this afternoon, beginning at 6 o'clock Eastern Time when we come back and continue our coverage. A live shot from Indianapolis Motor Speedway where the speeds have hit record proportion this year with a new record of 232.4 for Roberto Guerrero. We hope you've enjoyed our exclusive coverage. America's Cup is next. Our thanks to our pit crew, Gary Lee with the sore feet, Dr. Jerry Punch, who might be able to prescribe something, and Marty Reed. For Derek Daly, I'm Dave Despain saying thanks very much for being with us, and join us again at 6 o'clock as we wrap up the story of second day qualifying at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Since 1911, for 76 years, excluding the war era, great drivers and mechanical masters.
Okay.
Welcome back to Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the second day of qualifying for the Indy 500 and the 76th running thereof. The late afternoon shadows stretch across the front straightaway, and yet the temperature lingers up around the 80-degree mark. Heat is the enemy of speed here at Indy, and so the drivers wait till the end of the day to turn in their fastest performances. Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Despain with ESPN racing analyst Derek Daly, where we've played a bit of a hurry-up-and-wait game ourselves here today, not unlike the boat race. They wait for the end of the day to find the speed.
That's right. We've had many people practice today, but the Buicks of Jim Crawford and Al Unser Sr., who ran very fast about an hour ago, are the ones that are ready now to run in this, what they call, happy hour session.
Crawford has been the fastest man here all month, but motor problems denied him the opportunity to win the pole. That honor fell to his teammate, and we'll take a look now at the starting grid as it stands as we head into this dramatic final half hour. Roberto Guerrero with a tremendous speed leap from the old record of 225 to the new of 232. He has the pole in a Buick. Eddie Cheever with a Ford is alongside the fastest man today in an unusual second day of pole qualifying. The veteran Mario Andretti outside row one, his second year up front in a row. Harry Lyondike with another Ford inside row two. Gary Bettenhausen in a Buick in the middle, and Michael Andretti rounds out the family clan story.
Moving down to row three, Scott Brayton, who changed from the Chevrolet to the Buick, is on the inside. Danny Sullivan, the fastest Chevrolet qualifier, and then an unusual position for Rick Mears. Row four, Bobby Rahal. He's happy enough with that. Emerson Fittipaldi very unhappy, and Al Unser Jr. in the Galmer that most people thought would have a major problem here at the Speedway.
In row five, a statistical correction from our earlier show. Stan Fox car is a 91, and he put it inside row five alongside John Andretti, third member of the family. Eric Bachelard outside. Row six has Philippe Gosch, Scott Pruitt, and John Paul Jr.
Row 7, Paul Tracy, the rising star, driving for Roger Penske. Then we come to A.J. Foyt's second car, driven by Jeff Andretti. Scott Goodyear, very disappointed. He ran over 224 earlier in the week. Row 8, A.J. Foyt himself makes his 35th start at the Indianapolis 500. Raul Boesel jumped in this morning and qualified Hiro Matsushita's car, and beside him is Jimmy Vasser.
The remains of what has been a crowd of up to 250,000 people here during the course of this weekend to watch pole qualifying. Three men will cover pit road for us today. Gary Lee is there, and along with Marty Reed, and the man we'll hear from first, Dr. Jerry Punch.
Thank you very much, Dave. When we last left you, they were trying to reassemble the Buick-powered power plant in the Quaker State Lola behind me. They have reassembled the car, brought it back to pit road. They are getting ready to go through USAC Tech inspection, and finally, yes, finally, 44-year-old Jim Crawford may have a chance to go out and qualify. To my right, there is Jim Crawford standing. In fact, let's walk over and just get a quick thought here before he gets in the car. Jim, getting ready to go back out. I know you've been waiting. You're probably tired of waiting. Your thoughts prior to going out and getting the lap? You just ran a few laps at, what, 225, 226?
I thought that was 228.5. Sorry, I must have missed those. Yeah, the car's okay. We're just going to drive it around. It'd be nice to go out there and blast it, but they want the car in the race, so.
It's got to be difficult. You've been the quickest man here all month long. Kenny Bernstein said the one side of him wants you to go out and just blister it and show him what you can do with the Buick. The other side says go out and get it 4 laps in at 226, 228, that range, get in the field, and then work on the race setup.
My sentiments entirely. Yeah, it'd be nice, but I say we're not to forget what we came here to do, which is the 500-mile race.
Jim Crawford focused to go qualify at 44 years of age, trying to make his 7th Indy 500 start, getting ready for his qualifying run. Let's go up pit road to Marty Reed.
Well, thanks, Doc. Yeah, we were just watching Lynn St. James be pulled back. They're going to get refueled, but they are chasing their tails right now. The change in weather conditions has really thrown this team for a loop. They are down on boost. 42 inches is the max they've been able to get. And the other problem they are having is the tire setup. The stagger's all wrong, and there are discussions going on also as far as the wing settings. They can't seem to make up their minds which way they want to go. So we'll find out. 219 is the magic number for them. Anything less, they're going to wave it off.
You must feel some sympathy for St. James attempting to become the second woman ever to make the 500 field, but you must feel tremendous sympathy for Jim Crawford. He came here, and on Monday, and only the third day of practice, topped 2:33, ran fewer than 100 laps of practice, and yet when in the big moment came, the engine blew and he didn't get to run for the pole. Let's go back trackside to Gary Lee.
Well, actually, we're standing alongside the car that Al Unser Sr. will attempt to qualify momentarily. They had the car in tech. It was moved out of tech because this hole was not there. This is a repaired side pod after Gary Bettenhausen wrecked this car in a practice crash. This hole was not there. That's where they hang the 50-pound weight to determine the ground clearance. They had to take the car out of line, drill the hole. Now they're going to go back in. Earlier, Big Al had been up to about 222, and he came back in, complained to Gary Bettenhausen. The car felt like it was loose, like it was going to spin. Gary said, no, it won't talk to you until you get to 224. Big Al went out, went 224. They said, that's fast enough. Let's qualify it. Dave?
All right, that's the mark of the veteran, and the four-time winner hopes to crack the starting lineup today, along with the man who has been fastest all month. They wait for the cool of the afternoon, and you'll see it on ESPN. The all-important bump day and last chance to have a crack at the field. If you have missed our first show today, well, we had some interesting developments here in the run for the Indy 500 pole. To briefly update that story, we had rain yesterday. It delayed qualifying very late in the day. Everyone is entitled to at least one crack at the pole, and some of those drivers had to wait until this afternoon. Today has been hot, and that has kept the speeds down somewhat, although Eddie Cheever turned in a great run to take the middle of the front row. Now, we still have the headliners in Al Unser Sr. and Jim Crawford still to qualify. Buddy Lazier, who's been reasonably quick this month, in fact, at one point was 10th on the speed chart, has not yet made a run. Gordy Johncock, 6th place finisher a year ago. Mark Dismore trying to come back from last year's horrendous crash. St. James, of whom we spoke earlier, and Crawford. Those are the drivers still to qualify, and getting a shot at that here this afternoon. Tony Bettenhausen had a crash this morning. Didier Taze has just been out making warm-up laps, and so these would be qualifiers as of day 2. Now, we are going to be going trackside here in just a moment for an update, but here is the critical story, and that is the temperature. It's hot, and that makes it hard to go fast.
79 degrees. You mentioned it earlier. This can be the enemy of speed. We mentioned it earlier, but when the track surface gets very hot, these cars lose grip, and the engines lose horsepower. That's why, although it's warm, they wait for the shadows to come over this front stretch in turn 1 and try and make things a little bit faster.
It takes a chapter in the USAC rule book to explain qualifying procedure. We boil it down to a few lines. If your car is in the qualifying line at 6 o'clock on Saturday, you were allowed a chance this morning, and those were the cars first in line. The day 2 qualifiers all lined up behind that, and the best they could do was inside row 8, which now belongs to A.J. Foyt. Marty Reed is standing by with the man who has had a roller coaster week here, Kenny Bernstein, the owner of the pole-sitting car and of Jim Crawford's machine, still waiting to qualify. Marty?
Well, you're absolutely right, Dave. It has been a roller coaster, especially the last 48 hours before Jim Crawford. You're on the pole, but still struggling to get this one in.
We surely are, and I'm really...
Crawford, you're on the pole, but still struggling to get this one in.
We surely are, and I'm really sorry that Jim didn't get the opportunity to go for the pole. We sure tried hard, but just a combination of problems, kind of what they call racing luck. But we're going to go out this afternoon, see if we can get him qualified and get him in this field so we can go to work next week.
Were you worried something like this might happen? Because things were running so smoothly all week long.
It's been a great week. It has been a smooth week. You know, half the body says we're happy for Roberto Guerrero. Obviously, the pole, that's a great accomplishment, but the other half we're not because Crawford didn't get his shot. But, you know, it has been up and down, and this is tough. But, you know, it's always that way. Two-car teams are tough to handle, and it's tough at Indianapolis anytime.
Well, who knows? Maybe he'll turn out like Gary Bettenhausen last year, run even faster, even though he won't have the pole, and you'll be able to claim the 2 fastest speeds here at the Speedway.
Well, we're going to try it for the Quaker State Buick, I'll tell you that.
Fire is on the motor, so we are getting ready to watch Jim Crawford pull out of here as he'll make his attempt 4 laps. We'll be back for that in a second.
Jim Crawford off the 4th turn and coming down in anticipation of a truly long-awaited qualifying run here. Crawford, whose 233.432 mile-per-hour practice lap stands as the fastest lap in the history of this racetrack, drew the last qualifying qualifying number. One of the ironies yesterday of pole day, he did not get to run combination of the late number and the blown engine in practice, but now, finally, Derek, Crawford will get his chance.
He will get his chance. This is just coming down to turn 3, now into turn 4 of his first official lap. Crawford has been so spectacular here all week. They love to see him run here. He's known as a very brave driver, and Jim still suffers very badly from injuries he received back in 1987 from a terrible crash here at turn 1, right about where he passes now.
Crawford, the Scotsman who comes here with an impressive record of IndyCar credentials, and perhaps the most impressive of all, his courage in coming back from that crash. The first lap at 39.341 seconds. That's 228.7 miles per hour, and that's about what is predicted. I got the clear sense from the few words, and that's characteristic of Jim Crawford, that he didn't plan to go after a 250-mile-an-hour lap.
I would almost say this might even be faster, because the ease with which Crawford is able to extract speed from this car-driver-engine combination really has been quite amazing. Now, we heard in the interview earlier on he just wanted to be nice and steady, but now this is a second lap, and he actually bumps that up to above 229 miles an hour.
229.113, the number for lap 2. You're seeing it live from Indianapolis, and I wonder if his racer blood isn't up a little bit here. Easy to say you're just going to go out and cool it, but when the car is working and the track is fast, there's a tremendous temptation to put your foot in it and see what it'll do.
Jim Crawford has done more testing miles for Buick on the speedway here than any other driver here this month. He really has carried this program as his wife Sheila watches Jim perform, but he has been part of this Buick development program for so many years now. Although he only races one time a year, he's spectacular when he does come here.
228.5, the third lap. Remember, it's a 4-lap average with which one qualifies, and the average down a bit at 228.823 miles per hour. The best that Crawford can do, and almost certainly will do today, will be the inside of row 8. He would move A.J. Foyt back a spot. The power plant, a V6 pushrod Buick, a so-called stock block that gets a little boost advantage here. He's got the boost cranked up.
Passes the start-finish line, takes the checkered flag safely in the field. This is exactly what they needed. Now they can work on race setup, because the race setup is totally different. They need to run with 40 gallons of fuel on board. The car is much heavier. They need to run in traffic behind each other, because the race day is a totally different ball game than the flat-out style of qualifying that we've seen over the last 2 days.
Those were the 6th fastest numbers he would have been outside row 2 had Jim Crawford been able to qualify yesterday. We'll be back with Al Unser Sr. right after this. You're watching Al Unser, 4-time winner, bring his car to speed in preparation of a qualifying attempt late in the afternoon, the second day of qualifying, the first day, but he's even set seat in that car. I'm impressed with that.
Walked around yesterday looking for a ride, talking to people, said to everybody he wouldn't drive a car unless it was a competitive machine. We know this Lola Buick setup is very, very competitive. He sat into it this morning, was immediately fast. Gary Benton hasn't shook the car down for him, but in practice he was very easily above 224 miles an hour, so they decided today is the day. Now, Al Unser, remember, has taken over cars before very late in the program, like in 1987 when he took over that 86 March for Penske and went on to be the winner.
And won the race, got that right actually on the second weekend of qualifying, and won the 500 after Danny Ongaias was injured. He certainly has the experience, he certainly has the cool. It is sad that this opportunity for Unser was opened by the crash for Nelson Piquet, which so badly injured his feet and left the opening on the Menard team. Here again, the emotional roller coaster of racing at Indianapolis. Unser now trying to just put that car solidly in the field, and again, the irony, he'll move his old racing rival A.J. Foyt back a notch if he can run 224.
You mentioned emotional roller coaster in racing. Al Unser Sr., the last time he drove, he was involved in a very heavy crash at Michigan, where when he drove the Alfa Romeo, it had a suspension failure, hit the wall very, very hard, and severely broke his right leg.
223.1 the first lap. That would put him comfortably in the 23rd starting spot as he comes down now and takes the green flag. Now, we have set speed traps on this course. The Tag Heuer people have put the speed traps that provide the opportunity not to consider overall lap lap time, but rather car speed at the fastest point on the racetrack, the end of the backstretch, and also in the short chute between turns 3 and 4. And it'll be interesting to see the numbers there. The second lap at 2:23.914, upping the tempo pretty good bit, 0.8 of a mile an hour.
That is good. To give you an idea of the type of information we get from these speed traps, people ask how fast do these cars go down the straight. Well, the fastest cars down the straight this month have been the Ford cars. They were near the 240 mile an hour range. But the amazing thing, Al Unser Jr. is out watching what his dad does. The amazing thing is, oh, he touches the wall coming through the short chute. Al Unser Sr., that is a very risky thing to do. Now, he just brushed it, so I'm not sure that he even felt it, but it looks to me as if he actually did make contact.
Look at the numbers, 2:23.914, identical to 1,000 of a mile an hour to his previous lap. You cannot be more consistent than that. Identical laps.
Al Sr. complained after the practice session to Gary Bettenhausen that he thought the car was a little bit loose. Gary said, you got to go harder. He takes the checkered flag. He is safe. But that car does look a little bit loose. We watched him go through the corner. The rear wiggles around a little bit. But Al Sr., I think, definitely painted Goodyear along the wall on one of those short chutes.
He touched the wall and still up the speed to 2:23.998 on the last lap. Qualifying average 2:23.744. A remarkable performance for Al Unser Sr., who will occupy the middle of row 8 as Junior looks on. Quite a day for the Unser family. Their legacy continues here at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Interesting bits of trivia. The number of races prior to 1992 qualifying. A.J. Foyt with 34, Mario with 26. Al Unser has just earned his 26th start in the 500. What does it take to do a 230-mile-an-hour lap at Indy? Well, according to the Tag Heuer speed trap, a front stretch speed of 240, a turn 1 speed of 229. Those were the best numbers of the month recorded by Jim Crawford.
The amazing thing about those figures is the 240 is not much quicker than these cars went 10 years ago, but the cornering speeds are what are so staggering. Let's go down to Marty Reed.
Jim, it has been one of those months where, you know, we thought everything finally would fall into place for you. I'm sure you did too, but then your luck at this track has never been all that great. What's the last 48 hours been like for you?
Typical. Qualifying at Indianapolis is never easy. And this was just normal. Luck seems to throw everything it can at you here, and well, hopefully the crew have kept in one piece. They've been working so hard. There was an engine change this morning in 40 minutes, which is unheard of. And I think we'll have to regroup tonight and come out tomorrow looking for a race setup.
Now you got 2 weeks. Congratulations, you're in the show safely. Let's go back to the action on the track.
Man of few words, Jim Crawford lets his throttle foot do the talking. Buddy Lazier is on the racetrack, having waved off his qualifying attempt yesterday. Every driver has 3 opportunities to put a car in the field. He waved off an average of something close to 219 miles an hour, having circulated in practice at 223, raising the inevitable qualifying question, where did all that speed go?
That's right. The thing that interests me is just watch his head weave from side to side as he picks up speed down this backstretch. There is a tremendous amount of buffeting in that car, and that can be very, very uncomfortable. Just look at the buffeting on this. This is incredible. This is as bad as I've seen, I think, all month. That is very disconcerting for a driver because it's so difficult to keep your eyes focused on the turn that you're approaching at about 225 miles an hour.
Pit road observation from Gary Lee.
I went up to veteran crew chief A.J. Watson, said, what'd you guys change on this car after the aborted attempt yesterday? He said, well, we changed engines. I said, how about ride heights? He said, well, we also changed 2 springs, but that's it.
Buddy Lazier out of Vail, Colorado on the racetrack, single guy, attempting to crack the 500 field here. Comes out of the motocross and pro Formula Ford background, and he's got a shot.
And actually, racing is his second sport. He's a downhill competition skier. That was his first love. His dad, in fact, owns the Tivoli Lodge right at the bottom of the ski slopes in Vail, Colorado.
And so, as Lazier rounds out his qualifying effort, we'll be back in a moment to tell you how he has fared as the second day qualifying continues from Indianapolis Motor Speedway. First black man ever to drive in this 76-year-old Motorsports Classic that is very much a rite of spring here in Indiana. On the racetrack now, Fabrizio Barbosa, who had the misfortune of being the first driver to smack the wall here. That happened on Sunday last week. He is on his qualifying attempt now, and this is his first crack at it. He's got a pretty good, and he's touched the wall and hit it hard. Car is approximately under control, or roughly under control, as he keeps it straight down the middle of the backstretch, but with that front wheel bent out like that, how much steering ability did he have?
And that's it. He can make it back to the pits definitely, because these cars are so stiffly sprung, but the chances are with the grinding on the ground, he'll just stop there, and that may finish our running for the day here. But we saw him actually go through turn 2. He washed out of the groove with understeer, got into the gray, and when that happens, you really can never get it back, because you can't get on the brakes here and slow yourself down enough to make a correction, because things happen so fast. But Barbosa, not in good shape, but we can take a look at a replay of exactly what happened to him. It was on his third qualifying lap. This is entering turn 2. He goes down to the white line. Everything looks normal here. Now remember, he's above 215 or 220 miles an hour at all times through these corners. Everything looks good, still looks good. Now look what happens. Washes out of the groove. There's the groove. Now he's in the gray. It's so difficult to get it back.
And you saw that he was laying down that black strip of rubber when he got to the gray. The car is already sliding toward the wall, and it was a masterful job to keep it from spinning. He did, in fact, the arc carried him out, and he smacked the wall. Second contact happened to him a week ago today. Apparently no injury. The car damaged badly. No, he's out of the car. There is Barbosa, a former third-place finisher here. Al Unser has recorded the 12th fastest qualifying time of the week. Let's go trackside and hear from him with Marty Reed.
They say experience and cream always rises to the top. I tell you, you just jump in it. A day later or the same day, you put it in the field. Nice and solid, 223.
Well, everything went good for me today, thanks to a good team, and Gary helped me tremendously. He kind of coached me and told me what the car would do, and I never changed the car, so I didn't have time really, and that short a time.
I got to ask you, you touched the wall out there. Did you feel it?
Well, Gary said to use all the racetracks, so I did. I didn't mean to do that. I knew I was close, but sometimes you misjudge when you try to go, extend yourself, and that's all.
Well, it's great to see you in the field again. We'll be looking for you on Memorial Day. Let's go to Dr. Jerry Punch.
Thank you very much, Marty. I'm with the man they call Super.
Moving on down through the field, Cheever, Andretti, Lyondike, Bettenhausen, Andretti, Brayton. We're behind it. Sullivan, Mears, Ray Hall, Fittipaldi, and Unser Jr., Fox, Andretti, Bachelard, Gosh, Pruitt, and Paul Jr., Tracy, Andretti, that's Jeff Andretti, and Scott Goodyear. And then from day 2, Crawford, Unser, Foyt, Lazier, Bozell, and Vassar. Quick update from Marty Reed.
One thing to think about, Lynn St. James did not get a run today. She's got to think about it all week long. Derek Daly, you know what that's like. It's pressure, pressure, pressure.
It's a pressure-packed situation, Marty. I'm sorry that Lynn St. James falls into that situation, but there's a lot of work to be done by a lot of drivers, and there are 6 more positions to be filled in what could be another good weekend of qualifying next week.
We'll be here to cover it on ESPN. For Derek Daly, our analyst, and from trackside, Dr. Jerry Punch, Gary Lee, and Marty Reed, I'm Dave Despain. It is the greatest spectacle in racing, the 76th Indy 500. We'll be back next weekend.